But I want to have, if you will, sir, the record clear that there are no aspersions on me being associated with, controlled, or any part of the Communist Party in America.
You haven't forgotten that there has been a McClellan hearing and that a great many charges have been brought out against you.
There is no question in my mind, and I don't believe any question in anybody's mind in the Teamsters Union, except the newspaper people who are not members of the Teamsters, that I am the elected president of the Teamsters Union, and there has been no opposition to my leadership.
Jim, if you don't smoke and you don't drink, and you don't play around at golf, what do you do for entertainment?
Nashville, 1963. Teamsters union boss Jimmy Hoffa is found guilty of jury tampering and bribery after a long rivalry with Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Jimmy Hoffa, a man known as the working man's hero, the people's champ, the man who looked out for the little guy, is now a charged criminal with potential prison time. Kennedy's Get Hoffa squad was finally successful in indicting Hoffa, sentencing the union leader to 13 years behind bars. Hoffa was far from a saint. In fact, he had known ties with the Detroit mob. How much and to what extent is still debated. In 1967, Hoffa began serving his time at the Lewisburg Federal Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania. His time was relatively uneventful, however, one crucial altercation did occur. After a disagreement with Capo regime Anthony Provenzano, Hoffa engaged in a fistfight. This brawl, as many would believe, would later have heavy consequences. Besides this isolated event, Hoffa spent his time continuing to lead Teamsters, though through an acting president named Frank Fitzsimmons. Yet as time passed, Fitzsimmons sought to command independently. A few months later, in December, newly elected U.S. President Richard Nixon surprisingly commuted Hoffa's sentence, making him eligible for release. Although it came with a catch. Hoffa could not get involved in union activities until 1980, a fair deal indeed, given Hoffa's previous sentencing. However, for a man like Hoffa, whose life revolved around and depended on the union, this was simply not an option. Immediately after his release, Hoffa worked to restore his power over Teamsters. He challenged Nixon's restriction by suing, but ultimately failed. With no options remaining, Hoffa boldly turned to the mob, asking for Tony Provenzano's support. The feud between the two was still fresh. Provenzano refused and threatened Hoffa's life. At this point, the Giacalone brothers got involved. It is believed that they sought to cool the tensions. The Giacalones visited Hoffa's home in Lake Orion in 3 different instances. This was a part of an effort to schedule a peace meeting between the two enemies. The meeting was set for July 30th, 1975, a date that would forever be associated with one of America's most notorious mysteries. At 1:15 p.m., Hoffa says goodbye to his family and leaves for the Manchu's Red Fox restaurant and his 1974 Pontiac Granville. He makes a quick stop at the office of Louis Lintel, his unofficial secretary, to leave a message. At around 2:15 p.m., Hoffa calls his wife via a payphone, explaining that Anthony Giacalone had failed to show up. He was stood up. Following this, Hoffa claimed that he would be home by 4 o'clock to grill steaks for dinner. Later, 2 random men recognized Hoffa and quickly greeted him. Hoffa would make one final call to Lintel, but the exact timing of this call is ambiguous. One final witness reported that they had seen Hoffa leave the area in a Lincoln or Mercury with 3 other men, marking the last time he was ever seen by another person. The next day at around 7 a.m., Hoffa's wife talks with her children about Hoffa's absence. Lintel traveled to the restaurant shortly after, where he found Hoffa's Pontiac unlocked. According to him, there was no trace of Hoffa. The FBI and Michigan State Police promptly got involved. Chucky O'Brien, the foster son of Hoffa, happened to drive a Mercury Marquise Brougham that matched the description of the witness's statement. The two were once close, but after Hoffa's release, the relations became bitter. Police dogs searched the car and recognized a set belonging to Hoffa. When the police questioned Provenzano and Giacalone, they had alibis that placed them away from the scene. Now, this is all concrete evidence. Hoffa was most definitely in that Mercury at some point, but in order to determine what happened next, we must enter a rabbit hole of conspiracies and confessions.
The The decades-long search for the remains of former Teamsters boss Jimmy Hoffa turns once again to a former New Jersey landfill.
A tipster reportedly told police that a body was buried at the home around the same time that the former Teamsters boss disappeared back in 1975.
Right now, the FBI is digging in a Michigan field to hunt for Jimmy Hoffa's remains.
Numerous searches, anywhere from a horse farm to the giant stadium, and yet Hoffa remains unfound. This level of misinformation and deception is not only limited to the searches, but also greatly intertwined with the murder itself. Here's what we know. Hoffa desperately wanted to return to his reigns in Teamsters, with much disapproval from the mob. If the mafia was involved, it is likely Anthony Giacalone or Tony Provenzano ordered the hit. At some point, Hoffa entered a vehicle with O'Brien inside. This was likely done so that Hoffa would feel safe with a familiar face. So who could have done it? For this next segment, I will cover the 3 most plausible theories. This entire theory revolves around Frank Sheeran's 2004 book entitled I Heard You Paint Houses. Sheeran, a self-proclaimed hitman for the mob, was once good friends with Hoffa. The story goes that O'Brien drove Hoffa, Sheeran, and fellow mobster Sal Bergoglio to a house in suburban Detroit. It was here where Sheeran claims he shot Hoffa twice in the head. When authorities investigated the property, a sample of blood they found did not match Hoffa's DNA. Many former mafia members also find it hard to believe that an Irish American would be entrusted with such a significant murder. In an interview with author Philip Carlo, an infamous contract hitman named Richard the Iceman Kuklinski confessed to being responsible for Hoffa's death. According to Kuklinski, he stabbed Hoffa in the head using a hunting knife not too long after picking him up at a restaurant. After the murder, Kuklinski claims he brought Hoffa's body all the way to New Jersey, where he had it crushed with a car. The car was sold as scrap metal, and all in all, Kuklinski was paid $40,000 for the job. This final theory alleges that the mob had no involvement at all. Instead, according to a Hoffa associate named Joe Franco, the murder was orchestrated by federal agents. Franco alleges 2 agents showed Hoffa their IDs and coerced him to travel with them. They then boarded a plane at a nearby airport. While airborne above the Great Lakes, the agents threw Hoffa off the plane. Now, with a story as specific as this, there ought to be evidence. Unfortunately, this anecdote is backed only by Franco's words. Whether or not we will find out exactly who killed Jimmy Hoffa remains a mystery. With the mafia having hundreds of dispensable made men, it is nearly impossible to pinpoint the exact murderer, let alone associates and non-Italians. Where do I think Hoffa was buried? Easy, I don't. Instead, I believe his body was burned or broken down to nothing but ash, effectively leaving this world. But as long as the mystery endures, there will always be a fame-hungry nobody looking to claim credit. Jimmy Hoffa was declared legally dead in 1982, but until a body is found, he remains dead and/or alive. Hey, Enigma here. If you made it this far into the video, I personally want to thank you. I did not realize how long this video would take me to make, so I apologize for the gap in between uploads. But anyways, as the summer comes to a close and school starts again, I'm now realizing I'm not going to be able to divert my full attention to YouTube. So, I'm going to be on a short hiatus and uploads will slow. I'm still planning to do community posts and stay active in that sense. But as far as video production goes, yeah, it's going to be pretty slow. But any case, thank you again for watching. And if you would want to support me, consider subscribing to my Patreon. It would mean a lot. But yeah, thanks.